Hey there, this is DeneenTB, and before we go into this video today, I'm just going to let you in on a little secret about what it's all about. Now, it's a little bit longer than my normal videos because you're actually going to get to be in on a conversation that I had with my Business Mastery Partnership group. I love this group. It's a place where we can come together and be that iron sharpening iron for each other as Christian businesswomen, and we are partnering with God and with each other to move forward in our businesses. So we have these deeper conversations about different issues that we just love to talk about. And I'm going to let you in on one of our days, part of our conversation about what it means to see your work as worship and service to God. In fact, we're going to talk about a word, Avodah, that really means that. In Hebrew, they saw their work as their worship and their service to God. So I invite you to just be in on the conversation. It might take you a couple of times to watch through it, but really to listen as we talk through what it means to see our work as worship and service, how we're actually doing that in our everyday as we work for God. We work to serve our clients. We work to do what He's asking us to do. So I just invite you, like I said, to go ahead and watch. And if you have any comments, if you have any ahas, I would love for you to put those in the comments and let us know. Respond to us. Let us know what you think. Give us some of your ideas as well. And as always, make sure you subscribe, make sure you ring the bell, all of those different things so you know when my regular videos are coming out. Enjoy. But so Avodah, sometimes spelled with a V or a B. I always want to say small V because in Spanish you say V pequeña for V and V grande because it sounds like the same letter. So anyway, Avodah can be spelled with a V or a B, but it means three things. And because so much of our English language is very, it's not as precise, doesn't have as much depth. We have different words, or that we've taken words to mean different things. But if we look at the Hebrew of avodah or avoda, I'm not quite sure where the syllable, the stress is in the syllable. It means work, it means worship, and it means service. And this was seen in the Hebrew eyes as all the same thing. So what Eve and Adam and Eve were doing in the garden, working the garden, was also worship to God, was also service to Him. And so when we translate that into what we do today in our businesses, how we should view our businesses, I really want us to think through, what does it mean, this avodah, or avoda? I know I'm saying it wrong for somebody, so I'll say it both ways. This work, worship, and service. So when I look through this and I think, in the garden, God said, God saw with the work that He did and it was good. God saw the work that Adam was doing, that Eve was doing. He would come to them in the cool of the day, the evening, and they would talk with God. And I can just imagine them having these conversations about, what did you do today? What work did you do? What did you tend to? Which animals did you see? Help, whatever, right? So when I think through that, I want you to think about your own businesses. What do you see as being good about your work, the work that God has you doing? How is it good? That's the first question I have.
That's a tough one. It's packed of, hopefully, of many good things. I hope that my work is helping other women get closer in relationship to God. That's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
That's my hope. And I don't know. That's where I'm at right now.
That our businesses, we are to help someone else, just like you said. I want to help them do something. And the highest thing we can do is point them to Jesus, help them become better disciples of Jesus. Yes. But as a business, we solve a problem. right? What is good about our business? Well, every business should solve a problem, right?
Mhm.
Solve some need that someone has. So I think inherently business is to be good in that respect.
Yeah, that's true. And it is good that way because I help women who need help with their technology so that they can get their products or services out there to help others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we take the good and we have seen people like skew it or start out good, having a real purpose, and then they start to maybe go in a different direction because they're forgetting that God gave them this business to solve someone's problem, that their work, that he's going to give them satisfaction in the work, and that's more important than how much money they make, right? Or what he wants is he wants us to make disciples. He wants us to worship him through our work. And part of worshiping him is telling others about him, showing his goodness, as I always like to say, in the marketplace, serving him by seeing what we do every single day as an act of worship, of service to him, by serving our clients, by meeting their needs, solving their problems, that we're actually worshiping God. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so how do you think God is involved in the work that you're doing, in the business that he's given you?
So one of the things that I have learned through being in your program for so long is that the work that I'm doing is my worship. It is, and maybe it's easier to say what it isn't. It isn't separate. It isn't something that's like other that I do from 9 to 5, and then I go and I, praise God and be with my family. Like all of life is worshiping God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, and through like that kind of filter, what I do for Christian works, I mean, this is a nonprofit that was like I was specifically called to, and this it's of God in that way, like really directly, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like go do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody is doing work for that reason,
Right.
but everybody who is working can be working for worship. And
Mm-hmm.
I think of like Paul's letters when he talks about if you are a slave, here, do everything that you're doing for the glory of God,
Right.
and work for your masters in the same way that you would if you were working directly for God. So it's not that you're working like to please the client necessarily, or the master,
Mm-hmm.
any human being on earth.
Right.
You are ultimately working to please God. And that kind of motivation, like no matter what you're doing, if you were called into something specifically from God, if you're, working, a 9 to 5 to make ends meet, whatever it is that you're doing, if your motivation is to please God, then, and this goes back to what we talked about last time we met with the working for excellence, then what you're doing is worship, and what you're doing will shine through to others. So even if you're not like overtly preaching the gospel as you're working, if you are working with excellence and in your heart you're working for God, then others will see that reflected in you. They'll see Christ reflected in your work. And so I think that's how God really shows up in what I do, because he's really put that on my heart, like through everything that we've done together in this group and everything else. I think that's where he shows up the most with me personally and how I work.
I love what you said about no matter what you're doing. And that Paul's example to us, it doesn't matter. Paul had his own business. He was a tent maker, right? That means they worked in leather goods and things like that. And he had some professional colleagues as well with Priscilla and Aquila. But he's talking to everyone at every level of society when he's talking about doing all to the glory of God. And I think that in our modern age, we can get really kind of sidetracked with the fact that, well, if I'm called into business and I do it for the Lord, then I'm going to make XYZ, or I'm going to have these many clients, or I'm going to be this successful in the same way that the world sees success. And I think that what Paul shows us is that no matter what you're doing, you've still got to do it with excellence. You still have to use that work as worship and service to God, whether there is this huge monetary reward or huge satisfaction reward. It doesn't matter that you're working to eke out a living. You still can worship God. It doesn't matter if you have the terrible boss, if you're not in your own business, right? Or that the business that you're in just never seems to kind of take off the way you wanted to, or you expected, or you thought it would. We always have to look back and say, is my heart right? Am I doing this for the glory of God? Am I treating this work separate from how I show up on Sunday morning or when I go to church? Am I treating myself, am I treating my life more like compartmentalized? Because I know when we start to tear ourselves apart, we cannot show up in excellence in any part of our life. We can't.
Right.
I've noticed that the most is that when we put our little self in, here's how I act when I go here, and here's how I act when I go here, that we don't show up with excellence. And if we are not showing up, we aren't serving God the way he wants us to serve him. And we're certainly not worshiping him in the way that he wants us to worship him. And I want to just remind you guys that worship doesn't mean I go to church and I sing praises to God on Sunday morning, or I listen to Christian music during the week or whatever. That worship is really, where is your focus? That is what worship is. And when we can get out of ourselves and out of our own pride and out of our own thinking, our own selfish motivation, and we are only thinking about God, that's when we are in worship. And so if our motivation for our business is always to be toward him, to view our work always as a surrendering to him, a gift to him that is for him, then we're never going to be out of alignment. So that's kind of like what my next thought or question was. How do we cooperate with God to do this aligning? What does that look like for you all in your businesses, in your daily walk, or maybe in your goal setting? Or what does that look like when you're saying, I'm going to cooperate with God, I'm going to think about God, I'm going to worship God as I do my business?
Well, for one thing, it's being in the Word daily and studying either the Bible or through a Bible study. That's one thing that keeps you in the Word, and you're gaining more knowledge. Every time you study and everything, you gain more knowledge about God, and it helps you with your relationship with him. It helps you surrender your life daily to him and conduct yourself in that way. Although I find that I often have to surrender myself over and over because I forget when I come back.
Well, that's a good thing to know too. And I think a lot of people think that if they I go to church on Sunday, or I go to church on Wednesday night, or I go to this Bible study on Tuesday morning, that's enough, that whenever they show up to do the Christian thing, that's what God really wants. And it's not about that. It is about that daily surrender that sometimes, and this has happened to me, I can go through a day and it's like almost every hour I feel like I have to resurrender something because I've gotten off focus or I've got a
Right.
bad attitude or something like that. So I think and that's where God wants us to be, is kind of with him, surrendered to him, having to rely on him. So sometimes it feels a little easier than other times because of what our focus is.
Right.
But I love how you said you starting or having that time every single day with God is truly the foundation of having God-centered business. I love
Right.
that.
And I used to be how you said, I used to be like, oh, I'm doing a Bible study once a week. And then I would, then it would stop or whatever. And then, but things really started changing for me when I did daily study.
I think it's like anything else, like practice, 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 practice. I've heard, quite a few people say, like the faith muscle, and the more you use the muscle, the stronger the muscle is going to get, and that kind of thing. So there's all these analogies that ultimately come down to just the more you talk to God, the more you study with God, and reading his word is talking to God, and praying is talking to God. So the more time that you spend with God directly, the easier it is to hear him, the easier it is to say yes, the easier it is to know if you're in alignment, to discern, to stop relying on your strengths and to start relying on his strengths. You can't rely on his strengths if you don't know what his strengths are. And you're not going to know what his strengths are if you're not in his word and you're not talking to him, if you don't ask him. So, if you want to be like a virtuoso violinist or something, and you only play once a week, well, you're not going to be a virtuoso. So, I hope that, I don't know, that might seem harsh, but it really just is practice, just like everything else. And the more time you spend with God, the better.
It totally is. It totally is. You cannot, I have had more women say to me, well, I just don't know. I need a sign from God. I don't know which direction I should go or how I should go or what I should do. And it's because they haven't taken that time to develop, as I always say, that vertical relationship first. So that I love your words, the discernment, the alignment. You need to know God. And the more that you are in this vertical relationship, then it's going to become easier and easier for you just to be able to say yes or to say no to things. Because I love it when people say, well, I have to go pray about that. Well, it's because you're not always praying about stuff. Or is it sometimes, yes, we have to pray through things, but sometimes things come in front of us. And just because someone says to you, oh, I thought of you to do this and I think you would be amazing at it, doesn't mean that you have to do it, right? And sometimes we can just know because we know the path that God has for us, because we're consistently talking with him. We're consistently know what the focus is. We consistently can stay aligned and know when something is a real distraction from the enemy, and not have to be like, oh, I don't know. Do I need to make a pro-con list about this? What do I need to do about this? Right? You can know right away because you can say, no, I don't have to do that. That's something that is a distraction. That's something. And I always say, if it's not a distraction, God's going to bring it up to you about 50 different ways and 50 different angles until you go, okay, it's a lie, right? That's what I love about keeping a journal. I can go back and go, oh, why didn't I learn this the first time you said it? That kind of thing. Well, I wanted to ask you both, what has changed, or how has your view of work or business changed, knowing that you are in this calling that God has given you from before in your life to now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very interesting because I know both of you have been in different places, and I think it's important that people understand that when you're working your calling, your view of work is different. And I would like to know, like, what is one way that comes to mind right away for each of you of how you view your work now as opposed to before, when you weren't really maybe in your calling?
I used to go to work and do work and show up for work. Now work is what I do. Like the entire focus has shifted. So I'm not going off to do some separate thing that's outside of myself. This is who I am. My family is who I am. My worship to God is who I am. All these things are connected. It's all one. Now, I used to work, and this is the fascinating thing. So I used to view my job, my career, as a separate thing that I went and did. Now I view it as it is literally who I am. But when I viewed work as that thing that I did, that I went and did separate from myself, I was working 80 hours a week plus. Okay. Now I work anywhere between 20 to 40 hours a week, and that's pushing it. Like a 40-hour week, like solid work is pushing it for me because I can get more focused work done in a shorter period of time, knowing exactly where it is that I'm supposed to be working and what I'm supposed to be doing, and knowing that I'm relying on his strengths and not my own. So I don't have to work 80 hours a week. I don't have to work 50 hours a week because he doesn't just call me to go to work. He calls me to worship him. And he's given me to worship him in the work that we are doing together, in my family, and in my relationships with others around me through that discipleship. So if I'm working more than 40 hours a week, how am I able to do those other things that he'd asked me to do with my family, with those relationships? So I feel like the biggest shift was in realizing it's not something separate outside of myself, that it is me. I am the brand, you know, and that, and that's not even accurate. I'm not the brand. Christ is the brand through me.
Right.
And realizing to rely on his strengths and not mine, and that just reduces all of that hustle, all of that, you know, hours and hours and hours. If I've got to be working constantly or it's not going to work. I'm more successful now than I ever was in what I was doing when I was just working constantly.
Right. And I love what you said. It's before it was what I did. Now it's who I am. And I think that's the great shift of seeing the Avodah, seeing the work as worship, as service. And I know that God gives us more like intense times of productivity that doesn't take our 80 hours or whatever, that's not pulling at our bodies, that we get to make sure that we are taking care of his temple as well, taking care of the other things in our life that we are responsible for. And so it really lends itself to talking to someone that might be listening, that if you're striving and doing what Rhiannon said, like the hustle stuff, there probably needs to be a refocus of an Avodah, right? To really see the work, the worship, and service. How about you, Mary? How do you feel like your view of work or business has changed now that you're into this calling part of your life?
Well, I love it, of course. I love it now. Before, when I worked, I started out working for the money. I was gonna make a lot of money. And it turned into my corporate job that I worked at for over 25 years. And I was a terrible person. I was a backstabbing, gossip, you name it. I can't even think of the things that I was, just evil. And it was a bad environment, very toxic environment. And it was just a regular job. There was nothing, you know, it's just, that's what happens in these areas, these offices. People, you know, are power hungry, they're backstabbing, and it was terrible. And now I can't even imagine being that way. I can't even imagine putting myself now in that position back then. I can't first of all, people wouldn't know what to do with a person like me now. They wouldn't understand it at all. But yeah, it's been a complete change, and now I love it. I'm peaceful, I'm calm, I'm actually enjoying my work. So yeah, it's been amazing.
I love how sometimes God takes us, and it's the actual heart transformation, right? You were here, and obviously there were things that you learned there. There were things that helped you to do what he's called you into doing now. And that's totally fine. But I love how he can take something that can feel so like, oh, maybe I wasted my time there. Maybe it was just a terrible place, or I became this person. But then he lifts you out of that, and he says, but now you understand people that are coming out of that kind of environment. You understand, because I know for us in what we do and working with Christian business women, we do have women who are coming out of corporate. We have women who God's calling into this new thing, and they have all these issues to work through. This is how I was, and this is how I want to be. And so having that experience has allowed you to empathize more. It's allowed you to be able to say, but this is what God can do. And that's why the first thing that you said about Avodah was that we have to meet with God every day, because that's the thing that's going to transform the heart, right? So I think that it is just amazing of again, we can be in, it's something that, like what Rhiannon said, what you did, and you were there, and it was something different, and you were over there, and it made you a different person. But now it's who you are. And because it's who you are, you've really blossomed into this true self kind of thing. And it's only through God's grace that true self can actually happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I really love this. And I love that we had this conversation today about this word and how rich it is, and how we get to experience it because we're in business, because God's called us into the marketplace. And that as long as we keep our focus on our work as worship and service to him, whether we make $100, $100,000, or $1 million, whatever it is, that's not the purpose. The purpose is, are we focused on the work he has us to do, solving the problem that we're meant to solve, helping those we're supposed to help, sharing his goodness, sharing him, Jesus, with others, so that they can become disciples who then go and make disciples as well. Because that's what the Great Commission is all about. That's why we get to do it through business. So thank you for this conversation, ladies.
Thank you.